Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Valhalla Movement Podcast. I am super excited to have back one of actually the most popular guests that we've ever had on this podcast when it used to be called the Superhero Academy Podcast way back when. I think it was in March 2015 was the last time we spoke. And I think, was that roughly when when did your book come out? When the
my book came out in 2012.
Okay.
Market Gardener.
Yeah, but it started taking off.
2015 was when I started FQT Farm.
Okay. Yes. Amazing. So, well, you've already heard from him, Jean-Martin Fortier, who I consider to be Quebec's famous farmer, or the most famous farmer, at least in the world of small-scale agriculture and all things related to that. First of all, thank you so much for being on. Thank you for taking time away from the field. I know you're busy opening up a new farm and a new restaurant. Yeah. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about that?
Well, like many people, pandemic kind of struck a nerve. I was doing a lot of stuff, doing a lot of speaking engagements, traveling, and also running FQT Farm, Ferme Quatre Temps in Hemingford, Quebec, which is about an hour drive from my farm. Mm-hmm. And, I was committed to that for 7 years, and I would do the drive 6 days a week, and I was really, really into the farm, but I just kind of felt like, okay, like I want to be more home. I want to have a less busy traveling scene. I started farming because I wanted to be on the farm. Mm-hmm. And then the farming per se became more my focus, like learning how to just like improve everything and develop and all of that. And so, I just wanted to come back home. My farm is in Brome-Missisquoi, which is like an amazing place where there's a lot of farms. A lot of farms that are there started because they were trained at our farm at La Grelinette and other farms. And so it's my community, but I was kind of 7 years kind of away from it. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to come back, and I, like you talk about the Market Gardener Institute. We had an office space in Montreal. That's where we produced the online course. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like I wanted to bring everything back home also. So we bought this hotel restaurant. It has a 2-acre open prairie that was by the river, 4 minutes from my farm in Stanbridge East, the Old Mill, which is an institution. It's dates from 1849.
Wow.
And we bought that, and I started a project there. I moved my office space, so the crew is there. The Market Gardener Institute crew is there. And then I started the farm there, and then we opened the restaurant. It's a real farm-to-table restaurant where we serve only meals that are made from ingredients that come from Brome-Missisquoi. Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah. I really want to get into that, and I want to go deeper into the layers of. I think farming is changing for many different reasons, and I would imagine you kind of feel the same way. Although I recently went through a bout with the CPTAQ and all the different things related to this to find a bunch of statistics on farming and what is changing. And kind of I looked at Stats Canada to say, okay, well, I have a belief that small-scale farming is growing. I have a belief that more and more people are getting invested and involved in this. And then I looked at some of the stats, and then I was like, oh, maybe not, right? So, but before we get into that, I do want to mention a little bit of your background before we kind of dive into the topics. So, for those of you who don't know, Jean-Martin is somebody who, for me, as a pioneer in small-scale agriculture and everything to do with intensive farming. I'll call it kind of the, rather than the monocultures of fields of soya and corn and all the different things. It's what can you do to basically grow everything that you would sell at a market, you find at a market, and actually grow that in an intensive way, even in a region like Quebec or like Canada, a cold region. And I think your contribution to that, not only starting with your book, the Market Gardener, and then evolving into the Market Gardener Institute, growing into things like even you actually built a brand called Growers, making tools, making clothing for farmers, and the different things there. For me, was a massive inspiration. Like your book changed the way that I looked at farming. It was actually a big reason why my father and I decided, hey, you know what? We should buy this piece of land, and I should jump into actually working the land and learning about what it would take to regenerate soil and all the different things. What I didn't realize was how difficult that was going to be, and I had no idea. I honestly had no idea what it would really take, and I still think that I'm learning. I still think that I'm kind of finding my footing on it all. But I think the biggest, change that I'm starting to see now is that there's more and more content online, and back to kind of the school that you created, and the Institute. There's more and more available content that is now teaching the techniques of farming. I think it's like the evolution of your book to talk about, okay, what's possible on a small scale farm like Net, and how big a farm needs to be to essentially be profitable, all the way to like, okay, well, your course actually like, okay, here's how you do carrots. Here's how you do beets. Here's how you do absolutely everything that you could possibly grow around here. That is a game changer. I don't know if you realize that.
Well, actually, that was the purpose, because my whole philosophy is that we kind of need to replace mass production, industrial agriculture with the multiplication of small ecological farms everywhere. And there's a lot of people that want to do it.
Totally.
But it's going to take you 7 years to figure that out. This because learning how to grow all these different crops at the same time, making mistakes, and then you have sometimes it's like you have a year to wait before you can do it another time. And so there's a big learning curve into doing that. And at one point, my book was a good introductory book because it showed you that you don't need to have a big farm to make it profitable. So you could be farming an acre, 2 acre, and you can make a good living just by farming 2 acres. And then that's the beauty of that model, is that it's kind of capped. So like at my home farm with Moderen, you see that's my wife there. We've been farming that 2 acre for 20 years, 19 years. So we started in 2004.
Wow.
And it's been producing high quality food, and it's been producing a good income and a good quality of life for almost all these years. So like the first few years, setting it up, figuring it out. It was we lived in a teepee for 2 years, and there was a struggle there. But once you're established and you kind of get the juice going and you have your system running, you have a business that's kind of like on, I don't want to say repeat, because every year has new challenges, but you're not growing all the time. You're capped. So for me, then the missing link or the bottleneck becomes, how about you can do this in 3 years instead of 7? And that's where I became aware that, okay, if I show you exactly everything that I do, and I don't even need to explain everything, I just need to show you, and you start with that and you follow that, it's going to work. It's not going to be perfect. You'll have problems. Mistakes. You're making mistakes. I can't teach everything because some of the things are context related, but for the growing part, you don't need to reinvent how to grow cucumbers and how to trellis them. And it's just follow the guide. And so that's what we do with the online course. And now there's 4,000 plus people that have taken the class. It's in 90 countries.
Amazing. And
the word that I'm getting from it, and it took me 5 years to film it, so it's a long process. But the word that I'm getting is that, okay, this is changing my learning curve.
100%.
And that was the goal.
Well, I think that you're providing the mentorship that inherently we're lacking in our culture today. Because, go back 100 years, 200 years, whatever it was, almost everyone was involved in some way, shape, or form with agriculture.
Yeah.
Right? They you had to sustain your life in some capacity with agriculture. Or maybe it wasn't you directly, but it was somebody in your family or somebody right next to you. It was your neighbor.
Yeah.
Today, nobody knows a farmer.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's the culture. And we have no idea where the food comes from.
Yeah.
And we could talk at length. There's tons of podcasts and tons of stuff out there about that. But what I think is even more relevant is that nobody knows a farmer that's doing it the way you're doing it and the way that we're trying to do it. And I would say we're successfully starting now to do it better and better and better at Valhalla. But we've kind of lost that concept, because if I look at the land right next door, okay, it recently went for sale. So I started to look at the math of the land right next door to us. So it was a 179 acre property. About a third, 35, 40% of it is forested, and the rest is corn and soya fields.
Yeah.
Okay. They're selling it for $3 million.
Yeah.
With non-drained land.
Yeah.
And the rent on that property at the moment, on a year-to-year basis, from the corn and soya farmer, is $12,500 a year.
Yeah.
absolutely impossible to ever pay that off in your lifetime.
No. And the revenue per acre is about $600 when you grow corn or wheat or soya.
Exactly.
Per acre.
Exactly.
And on 1 acre at our farm, we make 150.
Exactly. So
It's a big difference.
There's a huge difference. Yeah. And then the other thing that people don't realize is that we're constantly pillaging that soil.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Right?
You're depleting it.
You're constantly depleting it. We're not in any way, shape, or form dealing with any issues around climate change or any issues around soil health, anything about that. And this is what the small scale agriculture and small scale farming is going to change. Yeah. And yet, right now in our culture, I don't know if you feel it, but there's a little bit of a war against farmers. Like I'm hearing it from from the Netherlands. It's like, oh, we have to take away some of the big scale, fertilizers and all the different challenges. There's the war in Ukraine that is now creating and kind of the segregation of Russia, where a lot of fertilizers come from. Are you seeing any impact of that in any way, shape, or form in your world of agriculture?
No. Mm-hmm. You don't, because you have, that's the beauty of farming small scale is, and small scale and smaller scales is because you're not locked into these big supply chains. Mm-hmm. Like, we don't produce our seeds. We get them from seed suppliers, but they're small seed growers. Our compost is local. We can make it, but we buy it from a local place. Everything's super local with the production. Mm-hmm. And you sell directly. So you're not involved into any of the big mass production, or you're not involved with supermarkets, and you're not aiming for that's the game. Where the game changes is that you're not aiming for volumes, mm-hmm. where you're making a fourth of the revenue, but you're making money because you're doing volumes. Yes. That's what industrial large-scale farming is. Mm-hmm. We're selling directly. I know you know this, but
yeah, say it. I mean, it's other people who are not necessarily. Yeah, absolutely.
It's like you're not selling. Your lettuce. A lettuce now is like $3. Mm-hmm. Like when you sell it to a retailer or a distributor, you'll make probably 40-50 cents per lettuce. If you're selling, 40,000 lettuce that's going to New York, you're making money because there's volume. But, I make $3 on my lettuce because I'm selling directly. Mm-hmm. There's no middleman. And so I don't need to have volumes. What I need to have is capacity and an established clientele that's ready to pay a premium price because I'm growing a premium quality product. Mm-hmm. And I have a story behind it, and I'm there to represent it. And so, man, that's the game changer. And then if you're not doing volumes, then you just need to optimize what you're doing so that you're not making too many mistakes, that you're not overplanting, you have always what you need, but not too much. Mm-hmm. You're not, doing crop failures. So it becomes a game of just kind of improving your farming. Mm-hmm. And again, because we're locked in the scale, we're not always scaling up. We don't need to always learn a new parameter. We're not always kind of like rediscovering how to operate at that scale. And then you do that for 7 years and you're like, okay, we've grown. Now I need to manage 40 people.
Yes.
It's a whole new playbook. We've kept the playbook small, and so we're really refining and improving.
And you also get to learn the property properly.
Yeah.
You get to learn the soil specifically. Any farmer will tell you that you're farming soil more than you're farming plants or anything else.
And the seasons that are changing, and the weather
seasons
patterns
are changing. I actually watched some of the videos on your YouTube channel about there's been more drought recently. Yep. I saw that at your Grelinette farm. Yep. I would imagine that was also happening at Ferme de Quatretemps and some different places. Valhalla have been lucky for the most part, but in general, there's always the different drought elements that come into play. And
that was one reason why I got the other farm also.
Mm-hmm. Because you're next to the river.
It has a river, and I can pump through it.
Well, this is where. So, one thing I've learned about as becoming a farmer, and that was my 11th season. Yeah. And realistically, when I started, it was a giant field. You saw it a few years after we started.
Yeah, it was a nice design though. It was
starting to get there. Yeah, it was starting to get there. I'll show you
but
a little bit of the development.
A lot of curves in it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Well, okay. So we started with the idea of permaculture more so.
Yeah.
Right. I never studied anything. I never went to a permaculture. I still haven't to this day taken a permaculture course.
Yeah.
At this point, I've done it. So I learned some of the different components to it. And then we started moving towards market gardening for certain products, which now garlic is our biggest product.
Cool.
We've actually, I think I have
show
some
me.
pictures. So like we're starting to get to the point where we're taking over more and more and more, so you've got the corn and soya field kind of next to us over on the other side over there. And then like slowly but surely, we are literally getting to the point.
Yeah, because when I was there was a lot more circles and curves everywhere, correct?
Well, yeah. So this area over here is kind of the north field. So if you were to look at Valhalla, actually,
that looks good.
If you were to look at Valhalla over here, so this is kind of our south field.
Okay.
This is where the main hub is, and this
is where the community
vibe and what we call our we call our bistro. It's a kiosque de fruits légumes for the map hack or CPT or whoever who's listening. And then we've got like a real kind of outdoor kitchen vibe and a real hangout here. And then really a lot of this is permaculture, fruit trees, berry bushes, a bunch of different things. And then we have a lot of garlic over here. And now we're starting to do animals on the back. Cool. We have like chickens. We're getting pigs for the first time. It's kind of a boisé type area. And then over time, we're starting to develop the north field. So this is where I'm thinking of putting a transformation center, a watching center. And I was actually looking at the designs you have in the masterclass around like, and I remember our visit to FTQ farm, where I realized that we need infrastructure. Like this is what I'm understanding more and more and more of.
You need a washing station.
I need proper washing stations. I need proper capacity. What the beautiful thing of our farm is, we have the market.
Yeah,
we have so many people showing up to our farm all the time because we're 20 minutes away from downtown Montreal.
Which piece generates the more revenue on the farm?
Right now, it's actually our south lot.
Okay.
Yeah,
growing berries and fruit trees.
Well, and garlic was the biggest contributor there. But I have here which one? So this is actually the revenue that we were able to make on the south lot in 2022.
That's nice.
So in the whole farm we did it. I brought the revenue up to about 180,000.
Yeah,
which is I'm proud of.
No, it's great. It is great, and I like the way you've set that up. That's definitely when I see what you're showing here is I see that you are educating the policymakers about the potential of this.
Well,
that's probably for
this is part of what I had to show the CPTRQ.
Yeah, that's great.
To talk about building a house because they don't want to let me do it.
That's what I did. I said, a 2-acre farm, you can do it. I showed the numbers and I
have a 4.5 acre farm and they're like, actually it's too small.
Yeah. No,
and it looks like you're mainly farming on the other side.
Yeah. No, so you're putting the numbers.
And I'm saying, okay, well, here's the numbers. Here's my taxes and all the different things. And then I'm showing them what we're doing and how we're doing it. It's kind of hard to display.
So that's the sales and that's the percentage
of agritourism versus agriculture,
nice.
Which is what I want to talk to you a little bit about too.
Cool.
But before we get into some of the other numbers, and this is kind of, this is the percentage of agricultural, production that we did in 2022, and this is agritourism of sorts. Okay.
Yeah.
But before we go into that, I want to show you a couple numbers that I think are a little shocking. So number one, I actually took this from the Market Gardener Institute. Yeah. This is what you were saying a 2.5 acre farm could make was about 100. You were saying, maybe you want to make about $160,000 of revenue.
Yep.
And have a certain profit margin from there.
Yep. The profit margin is important though.
The profit margin is super important.
Because that's the whole concept.
Yes.
It's not just the sale, it's the profit margin.
Well, the average farm in vegetables, I think, is like 17% profit.
Yeah.
Which obviously the way you're doing it, and I'll say we're doing it, is different.
Yeah.
Particularly because we don't even go to the market. Like you're doing the market. We're starting this first year. We're going to do it at Marché Éclusé, actually.
Yeah. They're coming to you.
They're coming to me.
Yeah, that's great.
And that changes the entire economic system of the component. And we get a lot of volunteers. Mm-hmm. But I'm getting a lot of unqualified people. I need more help. I need more leaders. I need more people who've gone through your courses. That being said, we'll get to that. I want to show you a couple of interesting things I was able to find online. Mm-hmm. This is the first thing. The average farm is now worth $3 million.
Yeah, and it's double. It's
and this is 2019.
Like and that we see it's double what it was 10 years ago.
100. Well, I would even say now with inflation, it's probably even high. It's more than double.
Yeah.
So if you're a small, young agricultural,
yes, okay.
How do you get into this?
Well, that's the thing, is that you need to compare apples with apples, because these are big farms.
Sure.
So big blocks.
Sure.
And so what you need is to find 2 acres, 3 acres, 4 acres, which is rare because of the CPTAQ.
And that's part of the problem.
But still, that's how you avoid having $3 million down the pipeline.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing. I got lucky when we bought the farm that we have 2 pieces that are across the street from one another, and then we have another piece that's kind of separated by a horse farm right behind us. Okay. That means under the law, they use this term called consigu. So if you're one farmer and you own the farms that are next to one another, they automatically glue them together. And you cannot separate them, and you cannot sell them separately. Although there's maybe some change in that near now with the Bill 103 and a bunch of different things, which I want to go down a little bit. But the problem with that is a farmer who has 179 acres right next door cannot sell me anything less than that. So to buy his farm, it would cost me $3 million.
Yeah.
But it is literally impossible to do.
Except if, let's say, for example, that your business, let's say it's a business. It could be a non-for-profit.
Sure.
Okay, but
let's sort of focus on the business side.
It's the proposal is like your setup to buy is 60 acres, 100 acres.
There's 179 acres there.
Yeah. You're set up to buy 179 acres.
Yep.
Because you have investors, you have a backing, okay? And then you're set up with all the juridique.
Yeah.
What's the word for that? The jury, the lawyers.
The lawyer. Yeah,
you know
the
exactly.
legal team.
You know exactly how to separate it.
Yes.
And then you're selling it to different farms that will connect.
Yes.
And you do all of that work, and you're allowing 4 or 5 farms to farm on what they need, and you're allowing the older farmer to retire. That's what needs to happen here in Quebec right now.
I 100,000% agree with you. Given that the farmer who's currently farming the land right next door is farming 3,000 acres and they're employing 3 people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unsustainable, undoable, nobody. And then I'll show you another stat.
Very polluting.
We have in Quebec from 2016 to 2021, we saw the number of farmers that have a succession plan being at 8.5% over the same period.
Yeah.
So currently, farmers
can't get out.
And the average age of farmers went from 2001 to 47, to 2021, 54.
Yeah.
And then if you look at under 35, you see 6,500 farmers in 2001. You're at 3,645 now.
I'm impressed how prepared you are. This is great. That's a trend, and not that many people are looking at that and trying to find what the solutions are. They're looking at it and saying this is terrible.
But how do we do anything about it?
Well, actually, it's like we don't need to check that out now. But in France, there's a group called Eloi, and that's what they do.
Sure.
They just buy up these clumps of lands, and they're not for profit, so they're not buying it to resell it on profit. They're
not trying to be developers.
They're just lubricating what needs to happen, which is kind of segmenting.
But I think in France they have the culture that has celebrated small scale farming to some degree in a different way.
I think we're there now.
Really?
Yeah.
Because when I speak to the CPTAQ and I speak to experts, but when I speak to experts who know the CPTAQ like super, super, super well, I don't know if you know. I think it's Richard Brunet from Le Territoire, right? So he's an expert that deals with the CPTAQ. I showed him an idea of said, well, look, if I took this big 12-acre piece that I have over here that's corn and soya right now, and we just grew garlic, and I took 1.5 acres and I just did garlic, I easily can make over $200,000 of revenue per lot on a 1.5 acre piece of land. And that could sustain a family, that could put a house on that, and that should be the direction that we're going. I speak to Desjardins Bank, love it, willing to do it. Talk to the CPTAQ.
Yeah, but it's changing. It's okay. So here it is.
But it's kind of changing. It's changing in the way that like somebody like you, and then the people you're associated with,
and you because you're pushing it right. You're pushing them.
Well, you're helping me push it right, literally right now.
Well, yeah, it's like
it's an important conversation for us to
have.
Know.
And it's if you're not there to push it, who's gonna change?
I,
So that's what I did.
But the likelihood that somebody can do what I've done at Valhalla, the amount of money and time and patience and burning over 10 years to the final point where in year 10 I was able to be profitable. And I say profitable because I'm still investing. We put power and water on the north side field. We're doing a bunch of different things. I'm profitable, but
it took a long time.
And I'm 20 minutes away from downtown Montreal. I had years and years of experience and expertise
but still,
and a lot of other work that I had to put into it.
You're cracking the code.
Sure.
You're opening the
one of 3,600 people cracking the code here in Quebec, apparently.
And necessity is always the mother invention. So something's gonna, I don't know if that's the stat that you have, but last year in Quebec, okay, it was the first time in 50 years that there was more new farms than farms that were stopping.
Yes. So I saw certain stats around that. And I have actually, and I don't have it pulled up here, but I do have stats around, there are more small, tiny farms essentially starting.
Exactly.
That are making less than like $25,000 a year. And then the number of farms over 100,000 are starting to peak up. Now, how much of that is just inflation, that there were 80,000 before, now, a few years later.
The model also.
I think the model is changing.
So it's trending, but it's not
trending.
over. The game is not over.
It's trending.
We all see the big ag is still there. And
where I think it needs to get to is that we need to be able to do, I started doing, this is designed off of your ideas. How can I build farms that are next to one another that either share different resources or different versions of farms? Maybe we put this farm next to the other farm, and maybe we have kind of a look and feel that we have to educate them on what that looks like.
Sure. I like it.
Now, the challenging part for making something, modeled again off of, some of the farms.
Hey, that's us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. So, good stuff.
So I'm using the path that you paved.
Yeah. That's 2004. That's a long time ago.
That was a very long time ago. Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm using the path that you paved to essentially make that possible.
Mm-hmm.
But when I speak to the CPTRQ and I even ask for a house, they're still telling me two things. One, no.
It's not big enough. No, because it's no.
No, because their answer is just no to everything.
Yeah.
And then two, it's not big
small.
enough. You cannot farm. You cannot sustain the farming. Two, you're doing things that are non-agricultural based on the farm.
And that's where you're showing it's like only 10%.
Well, so that I had to show those things.
Yeah.
But I mean, but in terms of like physical activity, we were doing a lot of tours. We were doing farm table dinners. We were doing a bunch of stuff that until the CPTRQ came out with a new rule, literally, they sent me a letter saying, you have to stop doing all of this stuff. And then a month later, they came out with new rules saying you could do 20 events a year. You could do tours on the farm, a bunch of other stuff. And I was like, thank you very much. You just changed the law. So you validated my process.
Yeah.
But I don't think that a startup farm can get to where we need to get to without having one of two things: a mentor like you and working at an existing farm that's doing that process.
Yeah.
That's great when you're out in the country or people who come from the country.
Yeah.
If you live in downtown Montreal, your access to that farm, your ability to afford rent in the city and then be a farmer is impossible.
Yeah, for sure. It's a project.
Okay. So online courses and all that other stuff change that, and then doing kind of 2-year residencies, working on a farm that's actually producing and actually able to be profitable is changing that game. Where our farm fits that is that people can come for the day.
Yeah.
They can get exposed to farming. I see us as a bridge farm.
That's great. We need that.
But they're attacking me for it. They're attacking me. They're saying, "Oh, you have people living in tiny houses and buses that are you're not allowed. You're doing non-farming activities."
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'll tell you something. I'm not worried about you because when I see how well you're prepared to fight them off, fight. Like they're in for a loss because this is great stuff, and that's exactly it. It's fighting back, and and when I started, and I don't want to bring this to. But it wasn't easy for us also. We needed to convince and fight off and fight back and really show and demonstrate. And then it was like, we took a big risk. We bought the farm without knowing if we could build a house on it.
Yes.
But would have changed my life completely.
Well, it changes the financials of the farm.
Yeah.
Because look, je le cacherai pas, I won't hide it. We have buses that are converted.
Sure.
On the farm that are using these different spaces a few years ago now. Yeah. We built, we installed solar panels. We installed big thing. We've got a beautiful washing station here now and a service point perspective. We're like doing more and more and more with the farm itself. And now we're building more and more infrastructure.
Yep.
Like we got power and water, like I said, a bunch of different things that we didn't have before. We only got power like 2 years ago on this side of the property, but we always had this little solar shed that was completely off grid to do all the stuff. But I can't do it without these people. And yet, I mean, I could.
It's a different setup because it's more communal the way you're setting it up. And that's great because it's creating community, it creates a vibe, and it creates all of that, which is what attracts a lot of customers too.
Yes.
So that's great.
But at what point am I a farmer or I'm not a farmer? By me doing a podcast talking to you as a farmer who is also a fellow farmer, I farm. Like I do this every day, every week.
Yeah.
Okay. At what point is somebody a farmer and somebody not a farmer? If I'm paying the bills for the farm, or today we went and picked up chickens, and I had to pay the bill and pay the invoice, and I had to call the guy to bring the chicken feed, do the thing. Now, I did it from here. I wasn't out in the field. I wasn't shoveling.
Yeah. I would say, okay, let's propose this. The farmer is the one that's kind of runs the farm because, farming is not just, putting your hands in the soil and planting a tomato plant. It's also doing accounting. It's also looking at the financials. It's about prepping for market, doing marketing. It's also that.
Yes.
So you'd have the farmer who helps and runs the farm, and then you'd have the grower who's in the field, dedicating his time to making sure that the harvests are bountiful, things are weeded, cultivated, things are done. So that could be the definition.
Well, I think that's a brilliant way of putting it, that there's maybe a difference between farmer and grower, or that there's maybe a balance to be played with being both.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like how about you pop up FQT farm just so that people see the scale of it. So it's probably the biggest permaculture farm in Quebec for sure.
And that's makes sense because it was funded, and I don't know how much you talk about this, but it had, let's just say, generous funding.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the Famille des Marais. If you go up, we'll see the farm. You see, so that's a pretty unique farm. But that farm is not just people growing in the field. There's people doing admin, accounting.
It's a huge amount of work.
Yeah,
this is $1 million production farm yearly, easily.
Oh yeah,
you guys pump out more than $1 million worth of produce every year.
Yes.
You have to.
Yes.
To make something like this work.
500 chickens, 500 pigs, 80 cow calves.
But it's also like ideal conditions in terms of initial investment and funding.
Yeah, but it's never ideal because what's the profit margin?
When you're a billionaire, you don't have to have profit margin. Somebody would argue that.
No, when I sit with them, they're like, "Hey, but
show me the profit margin."
Yeah, so the profit margin on a project like that is not the same as on my home farm.
Yes, your profit margin actually would be bigger on your home farm.
Oh yeah, for sure, like 5 times bigger.
Yeah.
So that's the idea of scale. It's like this is a really interesting project, but it's a teaching ground and it's showcasing something different. But
it's also how to scale.
Yeah, so if you're setting up to do something like that, it's going to take long periods of time to recuperate.
Well, so my idea is that south lot that we were looking at, this back to this piece over here. This is a 4.5 acres. You're not seeing the full piece, but there's another piece over here. That this is basically my quote unquote farm, and I see it as a mother farm.
Yep.
So it's a place where we're taking the bouture, we're taking the cuttings off the plants, we're growing, we're testing, we're doing different things, we're trying, okay, what about this garlic versus that garlic? Which one grows faster? Do I like it better? Does this one have like a different marketability than the other?
Yep.
It requires some level of like innovation, and I'm able to sustain that in part because I have an enormous amount of support that just shows up physically on the farm.
Great.
Okay. And I'm able to fund it because I had some amount of money when I started the project, and I transitioned from being an entrepreneur in marketing to now being a farmer.
Yeah.
Great.
Yep.
Not everyone has that opportunity. Not everyone can buy land where I think, but I hear you, and this is where I want to get to, is that I want to be able to create a way that somebody can buy their land, or at least somehow have a real ownership of it. And where I'm at now, and where I've actually tested this last year.
Yeah.
I'm curious your thoughts about this. As I created what is called garlic NFTs.
Okay.
So I created a way that people can invest in the farm by physically owning a row of garlic.
That's nice. Yeah, I've.
And then said, okay, well, wait a second. Like, rather than just buying my product, what if you're a restaurant?
Renting the bed space.
You're renting the bed space, but I'll even potentially do the labor for you. I'll coordinate the entire thing for you.
Yeah.
And then you have 3 options. One, you take what do what you want with the garlic. You eat it, you sell it at your restaurant or use it at your restaurant, whatever it is, give it away.
Yeah.
2, we sell it for you. We bring it to market and we give you a percentage. So you helped us scale the farm. We help get more machinery and we can help get the labor in, because otherwise in farming, you make money one time a year on that one crop, at least like garlic. And then the third option is we replant it for you. So now we say, okay, your garlic can basically double.
Yeah.
Because if I grew 1 row of garlic now, well, technically that 1 row should at least turn into 2. What if I keep it growing? And what if I do that as a service to actually set up your farm? Yeah. What if somebody who had no experience farming but would come into the process and learn today?
Yeah.
We give them a 1.5 acre lot and we say, okay, you're going to go through training.
Yeah.
And we're going to slowly but surely build your farm.
Yeah. And then
we're going to start on our farm.
Are you sponsored by somebody that's paying for the rented land?
Well, right now the sponsorship is that my dad and I were able to buy the land cash 11 years ago.
You could have a sponsor. It could be like, I don't know, McCain. It's there like, okay, we want to be regenerative, and then we're renting. So we're renting pieces of those beds because you're capturing carbon or you're doing whatever.
Well, so that I believe that we're going in that direction.
Yeah.
Where carbon taxes and carbon tax credits and all those other things are going to play a big role in 2 things. The collapse of traditional farming, and I say traditional, large-scale agricultural farming is a better way of saying it.
Yeah.
That's going to collapse more and more and more, because as gas prices rise and as, we saw it go from $50 a carbon ton to $65 this year. And by 2030, they're expecting $170.
Did you see that quote it was 2 weeks ago, that 1 farm in Quebec out of 10 is thinking about turning the key and closing?
I 100% makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, there's 8.5% of them have a succession plan. Yeah. Nobody knows how to farm. Even if they wanted to take over a farm, who's going to do it? Yeah. And then they're also far. They're far from the city. They're far from different things for the most part. And so, I 100% believe that that's happening.
I think, honestly, all these things that we're discussing, they're great. And for me, like, hearing this out, I'm like, yeah, whatever floats the boat. Whatever mechanism allows good food to be delivered to people in the community. Just like, for me, like, this is a different concept than what I do or what I'm used to.
100%.
But an urban farm also is different. A community garden is different. We all have different angles to what we're doing, but as long as we're delivering fresh, healthy food,
100%.
For me, that makes a lot of sense. And I have friends in Seattle, Equilibrium Farm. That's what they do. They rent the bed space to, Microsoft or whatever. It's like, okay, well, just tell us what you want and
we'll grow it for you.
We'll grow it for you, and then we'll deliver it, and then we'll come and we'll kind of make your employees aware of food.
That changes the game. But back to, if I went to Ep.02, they'd say, actually, that's not farming.
Yeah, well, these guys. So don't worry too much about them. Well, they're not going to shut you down.
That is 100% true.
Yeah, they're not going to shut you. They're just not allowing you to do everything you want right now. But
they're trying to stop me, but I found ways to fight it. Yeah. So I said, okay, well, what's the definition? I said, if I apply for building a house, I'm actually allowed to have 3 temporary housing structures, or maison mobile, they call them. That is the actual definition. Maison mobile translates to mobile home in English. Okay.
Yeah.
They're like, a bus is not a mobile home.
Yeah.
I said, well, when does a home become a home? Like, when does it become, how much more mobile can a bus that's converted into a tiny home be?
Because I'm sure you know that you're allowed to build houses for your staff.
Yes.
You're allowed to do that. That's not an issue.
But it has to start with me building one for me.
Yeah, well.
And then they don't even want to try and let that happen. Now, again, do I think I'm going to win? Yes. It's people like you who have paved the path that enabled this to happen, and also my ability to put these things together.
Yeah. Yeah, and to show, and what you're doing with the slideshow, that's highly educational for all these people. They're not used to that. They don't see things like that. They don't hear that. They don't see that. So the more they're contaminated by people like you, who are coming at them and say, "Hey, this is a real project. This is real stuff. This is not just kind of me with my friends playing bongos and smoking doobies. This is happening."
100%. And we'll smoke doobies and play bongos too, but
but it's not just that.
It's not just that. We are truly. I mean, look, we have 80,000 garlic in the ground.
Yeah. You're an entrepreneur.
Which we planted by hand. And our strategy for doing it, shit you not, is we were like, okay, we're gonna have a big Halloween party, and anybody who comes and plants for 4 hours with us comes to the party for free.
Yeah.
Period. So I'm not selling food. I'm not selling alcohol. I'm not doing it. It's bring your own, bring your everything.
Yeah.
But it's a free party. Here's the DJ. I pay everyone.
Yeah.
It's a different strategy.
It's planting or harvesting?
We were planting. It was a Halloween party.
do you
We
do
did the planting.
And
I do this. I do one
the
for
harvest.
I do one for garlic flower harvest, and I'm going to do one for harvest as well.
Yeah.
So I'm doing 3 parties.
No, but that's what garlic.
But they're harvest parties.
Yeah, that's how I do my harvest. I throw a party.
But
That's in my master class. That's exactly how I teach people to do. It's like, do a party.
yes, but back to I got a letter literally saying you can't do that, and then again the laws changed and certain things. Like I think the CPTR is realizing slowly but surely that essentially 2 major forces are happening. One, obviously the average age of farmers going up. More and more people have off-farm jobs. I think that was another stat that I had over here, as like the growing percentage of people who have off-farm work.
Yeah, that's always been like that, though. But
Yes, because of winter.
Yeah.
Because they go and work somewhere during the
Yeah.
winter. They do snow removal or other things.
Yeah,
for the most part.
or even people that have soya and corn, they do that on their weekends and after the job from the
100%.
coming back from.
It is growing to some degree, but it's an interesting trend. But the element of where was I going with this? Okay, yes, the capacity for people to kind of get involved and get exposed to farming
Yeah.
through parties or through showing up at a farm for the first time in their life.
Yeah.
And then they're walking somewhere and they're like, what's this plant? What's that plant? And I'm like, oh, that's a strawberry plant, and that's an asparagus, and that's this, and that's that. They have no idea. That's
great.
They don't know anything about anything.
No.
But they need exposure to it, and they need the capacity to do that. And I think the next thing that's the next trend that I think is partially going to support farming is agritourism.
Yeah.
We do need
For sure.
more agritourism. Like, I think that's partially why it thrived in Europe more.
Yep.
Is because there was a lot of people who actually go to Europe and like literally spend time going to farms.
Do you know why they call it the Michelin star restaurants?
I don't know those.
Okay, the story is, in France, these were restaurants in the countryside that was worth driving to.
Mm-hmm.
Hence, the tires.
Mm-hmm. No, the Michelin. Okay, yes, it's worth. Okay, Michelin star makes sense.
So that's not new, and that's what we're doing. Is like you say, you're like, okay, we want people to come out to the farm.
Yes,
and we're set up to host them and organize them and show them, and that's great. That's where it needs
there's
to go.
a giant jump between 50-cent salad, right?
Yeah.
That you sell in mass scale.
Yeah.
$3 salad, also more profitable. You're crushing that.
Yeah.
But I think you just tapped into with the old mill, and now what you're going into.
It's
now you're going to sell the salad for $17 because you just put it on a plate and put it in front of them.
for sure.
That has to happen.
Well, that's what I'm doing.
Bravo. I mean, that's where I'm headed too.
Yeah.
And I actually approached somebody who visited our farm. He came to just hang out, and we did a yoga session, and he came with his wife, and he runs Burger Week and Poutine Week and a bunch of other stuff. And I said, hey, like, that's great. I'm like, but we should do Farm Fest. Like, we should do a farm week.
Sure.
And I should help you find farmers and then host at the farm dinners, but also some, if we want to sell the produce to, local restaurants in Montreal and have that same concept, that's the number one way you can support small scale farms. Is like help them sell their product, help them find a market, and also bring more people to the farm.
For sure.
And I think that margin gap of agritourism and all the different things that go with that is super important.
Yeah. But it's not the way. It's not one way. It's one way. You could do volumes, you could do micro scale farming, be hyper, efficient, and you could do agritourism, you could do urban farming. Like it's an array of different things as long as it connects to being ecological and in consciousness. Yes. And I think these are the two. And I still believe in human scale kind of farming because I do feel there's good intention put into that. When it's machines running everything, it's like not the same. But
I agree.
So, all of this for me is all positive, and what you're doing is really cool and it's really positive, but it's new. So you're hitting the roadblocks. And remember, farming is people that are traditionally not
absolutely more conservative in every way.
They don't change.
Totally.
They just die.
Sure.
That's how change happens in farming. It's like the older generation, they just die. And that's true.
They're very close to it at this point.
Yeah.
Average
so,
age 54.
give 10 years and you'll be talking passionately as you're doing now to somebody. They'd be like, yeah, this is what everyone's doing.
Of course, everyone's going in that direction.
Yeah.
So you have faith, you have hope and faith that it's going there.
Oh yeah.
And you see it around the world.
Yeah. This is what's happening.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And you're part of it.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's amazing. Keep it
well,
up.
I really want to give credit to where credit is due. I think I learned an enormous amount from you and from even elements of your course and the capacity to even visit or have exposure to a different methodology that led me down the path of believing, you know what, I do believe that the future of not only housing, but the future of farming is going to be more small scale farms.
Yeah.
But there's a very difficult road to be paved to convince. I want to say it is like 4 people. Farmers, number one, that they should do this.
And they're hard,
to convince. Yeah. But I think the young farmers are getting it. And then there's a lot of people who want to get into farming, but they just don't have access to it. And this is where small scale farming would support that and access to smaller land. To investors.
Yep.
Yes, we need, like you said, a company that either wants to put money into it or somebody who just sees the benefit of it and says, okay, we have to go in this direction. And I'm not talking like a Bill Gates investor, ideally. I'm talking like
just like FQT or Desjardins or whatever.
Sure,
it's like people we have our economies.
Exactly. Banks. I would see mayors and towns have to start supporting this.
Yep.
And this is actually the most shocking thing that I lived recently is when basically somebody called the CPTQ and called the city and said, these guys are doing illegal stuff.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay. So they came and sent their people. And they're like, okay, they have people living in buses and doing different things, but they're all farming. And yeah, they're hosting events, but they're still, again, farming.
Yeah.
And then they kind of threw the book at me and threw a bunch of stuff. And I said, well, wait a second. All these people are here for a party where we're harvesting or we're planting or we're doing different things. Like,
it's great.
Yeah, but But when I brought this to the city and I showed them this, and I started to say, like, look, guys, this is where this is going. This is what I'm learning. I understand that I'm an entrepreneur, and I've been an entrepreneur for 17 years. I've been a farmer for 11, and that's saying a lot. But I've truly been, like, full-time farming for the last couple of years.
And I'm committed to making my farm run.
I'm fully committed to it. I mean, I'm putting every dollar and every ounce of energy I can possibly do. And I'm even changing I'm changing everything about my life to kind of align with this. The city was actually really impressed, and they were like, oh, we kind of like this. Like this is actually, and I was like, wow, yeah, interesting.
Yeah. How about community housing that's developed with, this kind of purpose in mind?
Well, so actually the first house that I'm building, which is my house, I'm designing as a B generation house. And realistically, I plan on having the people who currently are at the farm regularly or living at the farm, allegedly, for the CPTQ who's listening, to be able to live in that house so that they have a launch point to kind of get going.
Sure.
Because I believe that every farmer kind of needs a little bit of that. Like, and it exists in the map pack and the things like, okay, here's this credit and you get this other thing and you have to fill out this business plan and do this other thing. And I've kind of gone down the conversations of those routes. And honestly, for me, it's horrendous. I hate paperwork. I hate to deal with the government in every way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see the private sector do this. Like I truly see myself not only as a farmer, but I think the future of my farm and my personal being at the farm is to invest in farmers.
Yeah, I believe
and to run them through courses like yours, to send them to places like yours, and then to say, okay, come and experiment, come learn here for a while.
Yep.
And we understand that you're not going to do it perfect, but we're going to give you the best possible conditions, and we're going to put you next to people who started 2, 3, 4 years before you. So now you're going to start to learn with them and not just from the
like an incubator.
Source. Exactly.
Yeah, that's great too.
And that's kind of how I have kind of a more of a, I guess I have a little bit more of an entrepreneurial approach to farming, which I think,
like I think is perfect.
There's a difference between a farmer and a grower, and I think it requires both. And I understand both, although you're much a better grower than I am, and I'm learning more.
Yeah,
well, you're definitely, 100%.
Probably a better, entrepreneur or podcast host or whatever.
I think you do it good too. But I think I think this is where it needs to go. This is where we get to kind of slowly but surely move that.
Yeah.
Let me ask you one last question around some of the trends that you're seeing in farming and maybe bringing your produce to the market And then also what you're starting to notice now and learn now, I guess, is the restaurant side of things. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, anybody who's listening to this obviously has seen the price of food skyrocket.
Yeah.
You go to a restaurant, prices are kind of insane.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, it's actually kind of scary.
Yeah.
Number one, why do you think that's happening? And is there a way that we would see a bit of a change of sourcing rather than from large distributors and different things and large farms? Like, how can we bring this produce to the market faster, cheaper, better, easier? And how can we create better relationships between restaurants and between essentially end users of the product being consumed and the farm?
Yeah. So I've heard probably 1,649 apps or software or SaaS designs that are trying to integrate all of that to disrupt the food system. And my feeling is that, yes, there's a space for that. There's a way to really better design how local food is moved around and just kind of organized. So yes, but there's a lot of people in that space trying to think to do that.
Yes.
Where I see where you can be really an original is that, let's say, like, I know how to grow real good food cheap. And that's how I make a profit, because I can produce food cheap that I sell at good price.
Yeah.
Now the prices are going high. So if I'm continuing in that trend, I'm gonna keep on producing cheap because I'm not connected to the fossil fuel industry. So I don't grow with fertilizers, I don't grow with pesticides, and I don't have tractors. But why would I not go and just raise my price? There's no economic sense to just not follow the trend.
Of course.
But then I'm not really in providing a solution because I'm just kind of like
riding the wave.
But what if I can grow cheap food? Cheap. I don't want to say cheap, like
not cheap quality, just above that.
I know how to grow food at low cost of growing.
Yes.
And then I use it to feed a restaurant, which would otherwise need to buy. So then my margins are really interesting. Or a hotel, or a kindergarten, or so now and then the profit margin is there because they'll have to follow somehow the trend
of the price of food,
price, but then the margins are much better because you can produce at a lower cost in-house, which is, you can't scale that perhaps, but it's still.
I guess we could scale the number of farms.
Yeah, and you can show the initiatives to others. Like I do think that the answer to the question that you're posing is that more people will start gardening. I think that's what's going to happen. That's why I started Growers.
I think it was a good move.
Because that's what happens when the price of food just becomes too expensive. People are like, well, I'm just going to grow it.
Yeah. I think an economic crisis, ironically and sadly, will actually lead to the next wave and revolution, hopefully, in farming in our...
Yeah,
particularly younger people getting involved in farming.
Yeah, and then and that I don't know if your people listening to the podcast are educated about this, but when you learn how food that we eat at the grocery store is produced in poor quality, makes us sick, gluten, all of these things.
Yep.
Just like I spent 2 weeks in Europe and I was drinking wine all the time and I was eating and I just didn't get fat and I didn't get sick, and I was just kind of like, because the quality of the food there is not genetically completely modified different. And it's just like there's real bread and there's real, there's quality.
Yep.
And you drink wine that's not full of
preservatives or other things, and
so I don't know why we're talking about that, but
well, I think that you're shining a ray of hope, in my personal opinion, of the trend, because if I look again back at the stats, seems like less and less people are getting into farming. It's more and more expensive to buy a farm and the average farm.
Yeah.
And and the price of food is rising. And I think the barrier to entry right now in gardening is that a lot of people just don't know even where to start.
No, they don't.
And neither did I.
Yeah.
And I made every mistake possible, and
Yeah.
mistakes that I didn't even know were possible. I made those ones too. But I think I've learned a thing or two about what it takes to really grow food. And I think I've learned that finding the right mentors and building a right community and building relationships between the chefs and the restaurant and the people who go to that restaurant for a very specific reason, because they understand that this is supporting local farmers and local produce and is not supporting kind of the let's say the industrial way of farming, is gaining popularity. And that's where I agree with you, that I think there's a scary gap of I'm actually anticipating waves of people showing up at places like your farm and particularly
at
your
farm, because
they're going to show up. They're going to show up in droves in my farm.
Yeah.
And honestly, the biggest challenge that I have right now is having enough people who can like help them.
Yeah.
Who can like literally teach them.
Yeah, for sure.
Because there's a couple at our farm now, and including me, but there's literally too many people showing up.
Well, that's why the master class as a tool is like, okay, you have all the instruction that's on a video, and then everyone listening, this is how this is being done. They see it, they can apply it. And then as long as your farm manager is on board, because sometimes that happens, you have a farm manager that's like, he wants to do it that way.
Yes.
And you're like, hey, buddy, you know what? These people have been doing this for 20 years. Why don't you just do it that way?
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's a reason why it's that way and not that way and not that way. It's like,
sure.
Just like when you get super good results, you can change it. But until you get there, please just follow the guidelines. and
I actually very much agree.
Yeah, that you probably know what I'm talking about. You know,
I'm one of those people who started. I was naive enough to think that I could change the world, and then I realized that the world changed me. And then I realized that I could change the world, but if I just started like one literal plant and one garden bed at a time.
Yeah.
If and one podcast or one graphic, and I think that. Like I'm actually considering creating a course on like how to start not growing. How can you like become a manager of a farm? Like how can you like understand the inputs and like the strategy around farming? Because I'm learning a lot more, and I actually learned this from you. It's like every step matters. Like every little detail, like how it flows in one way or out the other way. Like you change the way I started to think about everything, and then I realized, I'm playing a giant game of Catan, where like I have to manage resources. Like it's a game. It became a game in a very different way.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden that mindset shifted the way I started investing in the farm and what I started investing in. And I think it drastically changed our results in the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you're right that we shouldn't reinvent the wheel.
Well, it's you can reinvent it in many things, but in how to farm,
it's hard to.
Yeah, well, it's a big learning curve, and you can make a lot of mistakes, and they're costly. Mm-hmm. It's just like not that many hockey players reinvent how to play the game.
Well,
a few of them happen.
Yeah, sure.
But basically, just
there's some ways to play the game, and you should learn the basics before you try and reinvent it.
Yeah. Just kind of follow the game in the game.
Well, that being said, is there any last words, last piece of advice, anything that you want to share that's on your heart or mind, or anything that maybe they should come check out your restaurant? Or
I think that'd be cool if they want to check that out. Espace Old Mill. I think it's really important that more and more people are into farming. Like even if they're not farming, like that they care about that. And I think farmers like you and others, they're change makers because they're on the front line of climate change. We're dealing with climate change, and I think that's going to be a big, big part of tomorrow.
Agreed.
More than people imagine. Like when I got into farming because I studied at McGill at the McGill School of Environment in Montreal, and we were studying climate change 20 years ago, and we were studying what would happen when all of the what's the word? Les glaciers.
Yeah, the ice
caps would melt, and then that would have that would speed up the effect because now the light wouldn't be blocked. And it would just kind of come in, and then And that's, the ice caps have melt, and there's like 2 years left, and then there's no more ice cap on the planet. So it's going to be scary. And if you're not somehow involved in growing your food or food security, or, it's going to be
It's going to be real.
It's going to be real.
I'm right there with you. Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate what you do, and I appreciate you.
One last question. Do you know where we're going for dinner? Did you find
I have an option. I have an option for us. Yeah, there's a nice, beautiful place across the street that I know the chef. Okay. So that we could go there, or but I mean, it's less like a local restaurant, and I'm happy to go anywhere. All right. Here's a beautiful thing. We live in a town. We live in a city that has like the most restaurants per capita on the planet, and we actually have phenomenal food here.
Montreal has the best restaurant scene in North America, by far,
by landslide. I fully agree.
And I don't care what people say. Like, I've been to so many restaurants. Like, when I travel, I'm invited to all these nice restaurants, and I meet with the big chefs, and the food is always nice, but there's always a little something of Europe missing that we have here.
I fully agree with you.
And so.
Well, it's thanks to growers like you that make that possible.
Well, it's I wouldn't say that, but that's nice of you to say.
I'll say it for you. All right. Well, thank you very much, anybody who's listening to this. If you want to support, first of all, please just go check out JM and his online course, a school, restaurant, a bunch of different components. Growers, actually T-shirts like this and sweaters and a bunch of other stuff that they do, as well as tools, which are very helpful and relevant. If you got to here, the number one thing that you could do is hit subscribe, leave a comment, like, engage. Like, if you got to this point, it's because you found value in this podcast and you found value in some of the things that JM is sharing. So please go and show support, because that's, at the end of the day, is the number one thing that we need. So until then, I'll see you in the next episode. And I want to mention this because some of the people who helped me design the farm and some of these slides that I showed JM today are coming on. So I actually want to show the evolution and the thought process behind why we're doing what we're doing at the farm. So stay tuned for the next episode, and see you then.
Good stuff.